Hello and welcome to Tomlin's Harmonica podcast, where I'll be hanging out with players and teachers and having conversations loosely based around harmonica. This week's guest is a prodigious talent on both diatonic and chromatic harmonica. He's a Berklee College of Music graduate and he stings harmonica player. He is Shane Segar. Welcome to the podcast, Shane. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having me. Great honor to be here.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. So whereabouts are you based?
I am based in Boston, Massachusetts, in New England, and I live right downtown, right across from Tremont on the Common.
Nice.
And yeah, it's right. Great view of the city. I've lived in this apartment complex my whole life, which is 26 years.
Wow. Okay, cool. And how's it looking at the moment in COVID land?
It's okay. I try to get outside as much as possible and just go walk around. I ride my bike a lot. Boston's a great city especially on the Charles River, just riding your bike around and going for a run. But from what I can tell, it's pretty deserted outside. I think people are taking the stay-at-home order very seriously, which I'm glad they are. But it's looking up. I think there's been a decline in cases recently, and so it doesn't seem like we're through it, but it seems like we're doing better.
Very cool. That's good to know. We're kind of in the same boat where it's quietening down a little bit. People are struggling to stay indoors because it's spring and it's getting nicer and nicer. So it's sometimes a little bit difficult. But I think people generally are taking it quite seriously, which is cool. I got to say, I'm a massive fan of Boston. We went there for our honeymoon a couple of years ago, and it was such a nice place. We want to go back, and very cool. So,
whereabouts were you exploring in the city?
So we did so much tourist stuff. So we were staying in Jamaica Plains, and then just kind of taking the train into the city every day. And it was around the 4th of July, and 4th of July is actually my wife's birthday, and it was her 30th birthday. So, you guys put on fireworks for her birthday, which was amazing. That was very cool. And we did a bit of Cambridge and, all the museums, and it was very, very fun. Although it was the middle of the most insane heat wave ever.
Yeah. I used to live, when I was at Berklee, I lived in a apartment that was kind of 2 blocks from the campus on Hemingway Street, which is where all the Northeastern and Berklee kids tend to congregate. And the apartment I was in, the air conditioning broke. I think it was the second summer I was there. So I was running, 10 fans all at one time.
Yeah, it feels like it's a city where it's not really designed for lots of heat. And if you do get a heat wave, you have to just go to a shopping mall and stay in there in the aircon.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no airflow. It's just it's very like still heat.
Yeah.
It's just like you're walking around in a sauna or a steam room.
Yeah. But it's still a great place. And I remember one of the places that I wanted to visit was Berklee. And we went to the top of this, I can't remember what the tower was, but this massive tower across the road from Berklee. And I just kind of stared down. I was like, oh my God, there it is.
At probably the Prudential?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you were saying that you're getting out on your bike, and I noticed that you also do quite a lot of other kind of sporty stuff. You're into your boxing. Are you able to train at the moment?
Not as I'd like to. The great thing about where I live is there's a great just in our apartment there's a great gym set up. So there's free weights and there's a bike and. So we're able to get some kind of activity, me and my dad and my mom and people who are living here. But no, I can't, there's no heavy bag, there's no sparring partners. So it's a little more difficult, but I miss it all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And like, I've never done any kind of combat sport apart from capoeira, which is kind of as low contact as you can get. But like, do you have a certain energy that you're not getting out, not sparring?
No, the way I've always looked at boxing is that it's a discipline. It's a lot like playing music, and in a lot of ways, being a musician actually helped me a lot with boxing. And I'd say 90% of it is rhythm, and 90% of it comes. And me originally, so just a little background on me is originally I was a drummer. I started playing drums when I was 9, and harmonica when I was 13, 14. So the rhythm transferred very nicely to the things that are involved in boxing, such as rhythm of the punches, jump rope, all that stuff. So it was just a good way for me to be active. I used to be decently overweight, but boxing helped me to kind of come around.
Very cool. Well, people can't see you because this is an audio podcast, but Shane is a very physically fit-looking 26-year-old, a very handsome man. So well done. And you're also into your scuba diving as well.
Yeah. So part of us traveling is that we're put into kind of uncomfortable situations sometime. And the first time that my sister and I and my dad had been a couple times, but the first time we went scuba diving was about 10 years ago, and it was in Egypt in a place called Sharm el-Sheikh. And unbeknownst to us, there had been, I think it was like 10 shark attacks the summer before, but no one said anything, which was great. But the diving experience was great, and it's another world when you're doing that. And me and my sister, who had never done it before, were a little nervous about it. But on the second day, we were going down something like 40 meters.
Wow.
So we definitely plunged headfirst into it. And on the last night that we were in Egypt, we did a night dive, which you need a long time to do, but we just decided to do it. And of course, we went diving in a place called Shark's Bay. So it was a little scary, but it was a lot of fun. And I think dove 2 other times throughout the last 10 years, but it's just a great experience.
Nice. So I mean, like I have a whole list of things that I'm going to do when we can start traveling again. It sounds like you probably have like a whole bunch of stuff that, like, what's the first thing you're going to do when everything's back to normal?
There's a lot of travel, physical related things that I want to do. There's countries that I still haven't been to that I'd love to go see, like New Zealand and Romania and Peru. There's a lot of places I'd like to go see. So I keep a journal every day, and I always keep, like, if I think of a new place I want to go to when all this is over, I just write it down.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, well, we've alluded a little bit to travel and things, and we are going to talk about music, but I also want to ask you a little bit about your origin story, because I started reading about it, and it seems that you've had a slightly unconventional childhood. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a very good word for it. Grew up in Boston, and when I was about 6 years old and my sister was about 9, my parents decided to take us both out of school. So I guess that would have been when I was in first grade. And we decided to go out on the road, go out into the world, and try to find ways to be useful. And the places that we were going were not really places that a lot of people were traveling at that time, such as Rwanda, Nepal, Pakistan, but the whole thing here is that we were living there on the ground for months at a time. I think it was that we spent almost 3 months in Nepal one time. And wow. There are other countries too that become second homes, Bhutan, South Africa. I think I did the counting the other day, and it's something like 65 countries that I've been to.
That's nuts.
But so we would go, the first time that we went out for a year straight, just traveling. And it was just a great experience for me and for my family. And it kind of spawned this foundation called the Segar Family Traveling Foundation and the Roadshow, which we've continued now for about almost 21 years now. So traveling has always been a big part of our lives. And since that trip that we took in 2000, we've taken something like, I don't know, 50 trips. And the trips would range from being 2 weeks to being another year-long trip. And it was all living in these places like Rwanda and Nepal, just trying to be as helpful as possible and being close enough to the ground to actually listen and make a difference in a real way, in a sustainable way.
That's so cool. And it was so surprising because I've been reading so many harmonica player biographies in preparation for these podcasts. And most of them are fairly standard. The origin stories are fairly standard. And then I got to yours, and I was just like, "Wow, this is not what I expected." Was it kind of? I think a lot of kids would maybe find it quite stressful being taken out of school and traveling like that to not exactly kind of spa destinations. Did you find it stressful, or was it just a big adventure?
I mean, honestly, when we first started doing it, I think I was too young to really understand what stressful really meant. So in doing it, it felt more like kind of just work. Like this was what we were supposed to be doing. And as a result, my classmate for most of my childhood was my sister, which was really cool and definitely brought us really close together. But it never felt, I mean, obviously there are some situations that you're in, like if you're 7 years old and you're in Pakistan in the Khyber Pass where Osama bin Laden was, that's kind of a little stressful, but you only figure that out several years down the road. But it was never, it was always, we always felt safe, and it really, it was very important work that we were doing. So it always felt like that.
That's very cool. And the foundation's still ongoing, isn't it?
Yeah. We have had our kind of big project is with the Dalai Lama. It's that I think starting in 2000 was the first year, we began this program with His Holiness that was teaching Western science to Tibetan monks. And it is the single biggest change to the monastic curriculum in almost a century. Wow. Which is really cool. And the Dalai Lama was very adamant about the monks learning science. So we've invested a lot of money and time into that project. We built science centers all over India, which is where a majority of the Tibetan monks are now, because obviously Tibet is kind of a mess right now. Yeah. So a lot of the trips have been to these monasteries and living with the monks, seeing how the classes go, and bringing these Western scientists from Emory University is a big contributor to all of this too. So bringing the scientists over to teach science. But now, since the program has gone on for this long, now the program is shifting more to the monks being teachers of science, which is really cool.
Wow, that's very cool. So, you're a pro harmonica player, but I feel this sounds like this is probably something that you're still going to be involved in forever. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely been a huge part of my life, and will continue to be a big part of my sister and I's lives. My dad still does a majority of the work. My parents do a majority of the work. But yeah, it will always be a big part of our lives, and the lessons that we've learned and the experiences we've had have very much influenced us both as people.
Very cool. That's awesome. And was there anything that you wanted to be before you decided to be a musician?
When I was really young, I my first aspiration was to be a zookeeper.
Okay.
Like when I was in kindergarten. No, it was always, as I mentioned, I started playing drums when I was 9, because I saw the movie School of Rock, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever to play the drums.
Nice.
So I begged my mom to get me a drum set, and she did, which was great. And I got a teacher, and I got pretty serious about it pretty quickly. So I felt like, and then I had my first concert, I think like 6 months after that. So I think it was after that concert that I really decided at 9 that like this was gonna, if it wasn't gonna be my career, it was gonna be a big passion of mine in
Hmm.
my life. And as I got older and I got more and more serious about it, uh, it became more and more apparent that music was going to be my life.
That's very cool, Joe. This makes me feel super old, which I don't feel a lot of the time. But School of Rock is the movie that I saw and made me want to be a music teacher. After I'd been a musician for a while, so that's quite funny. I think that film has a lot to answer for, probably.
Yeah, and it was great too. It was a nice like I think before that like I don't really remember the kind of music I was listening to, but that movie kind of introduced me to AC/DC and Black Sabbath and all these bands Led Zeppelin, all these bands that I love and that I grew up listening to. So definitely owe a lot to that movie. The more I
Yeah,
think about it.
those are serious drum bands as well. Do you still play drums now?
Every now and again, I was giving drum lessons for a little while when I was home about a year ago. But every now and again, a gig will come up and I'll play drums. I don't really have a style that I fit into with drums. Like for years, I was a just John Bonham, like
Meathead.
just I just want to hit as hard as possible. But more and more as I got older, I liked Joe Jones and Buddy Rich and people like that I really dug, and of course James Brown's drummer Clyde Stubblefield was a big influence on me. So every now and again a jazz gig will pop up and I'm a little hesitant about it, but I'll always do it.
Nice, that's very cool. Okay, so let's move on to harmonica, because you started playing harmonica. Well, you said when you were kind of 13, 14,
Yeah.
which I feel is quite early. And most of the people I've spoken to, they kind of come to harmonica late teens, early 20s at the earliest.
Mhm.
What inspired it?
So in addition to being a drummer, I was also a very serious soccer player. I was a goalie for many many years, and I had a game. I was playing varsity soccer when I was 14, 15 when I was in high school, and I was also the youngest person on the team. So it was a big deal. So we had one game where I went out to go break up a play as a goalie, and I ended up busting my finger really badly, and had to have surgery and have my arm in a cast for several months, which sucked because it meant that I couldn't play the drums. However, I still really wanted to play music, and I was asking my music teacher, my high school music teacher at the time, about, I don't really want to sing because that's not really my bag. I want to do something else. I don't want to play the cowbell, but like, what else can I do? And he had the great idea. He said, "Why don't you try playing harmonica?" Because at the time I would just use the rack.
Nice.
I thought that was intriguing, and my dad and my mom were both very adamant that they thought that was cool, and I liked it because it was very portable, and being on the road so much, it was just nice to have something in your pocket. The thing that really got me really into it was I'd been playing for a little while, and I studied the little booklet that was in the Hohner harmonicas,
Mhm.
and the thing that really inspired me was my music teacher showed me or played me a track called "Blowing the Family Jewels" by William Clarke,
Nice.
which was interesting that was my first harmonica player and not Little Walter and not Sonny Boy or someone like
Hmm.
that. So once I heard that was when I got really really serious about it, which was when I was about 15, I think.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, and from William Clark, I really learned a majority of what was critical to me playing the chromatic. Playing third position was a big thing that I learned from him, and just that general West Coast vibe was really cool to learn at such a early age. And after him is when I got into James Cotton and Sonny Boy and Big Walter and all those guys.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. William Clarke is someone that I only got into a couple of years ago because of a mutual friend of ours, Ronnie Shellist. I was taking lessons with Ronnie, and he's like, "You got to listen to William. Like that's everything you need is right there." And I think he's that kind of player that players know, but other people don't necessarily. He's kind of the secret, the best kept harmonica secret. But definitely worth checking out.
Absolutely, I completely agree, and I was kind of taken back a little bit when I would listen to Little Walter and Big Walter. Is that I thought that, because I was younger, I thought that William Clarke was the OG. I thought that I thought it was like him and then everyone else, because I didn't know any better. Like when I was playing drums, my first introduction to blues was my friend was a blues guitarist and asked me to play a shuffle. I was like, I don't know what a shuffle is. But I spent a week with it, and I really got to love that feel, that true kind of Chicago shuffle feel, and it was cool. And then being from a rhythm background, the stuff that I was starting to do on the harmonica was much more rhythm based. It was like that beatboxing kind of thing, and those those heavy tongue block rhythms, which was cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Joe, it's funny. I also only picked up harmonica because of an injury stopping me from playing guitar. My injury is nowhere near as sexy as your injury. I literally got tendonitis from playing too much. But yeah, it's funny that harmonica doesn't seem to be many people's first choice. But then, like when you start playing it, you get addicted, and it's just so expressive. Which is something that's maybe difficult to recreate on other instruments like drums and even guitar. Like it is an expressive instrument, but I think anything that's breath linked, there's just that extra level. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and especially with bending, that was like that. I struggled for a long time with learning how to bend because I heard all this expression that was coming out of like William Clarke's playing like that big 4-draw bend sound. I just couldn't get it for a long time. And then when I finally got it, I remember that moment so clearly. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'm getting a little bit of expression.
Yeah. Oh man, it's really nice. Like, every time I talk to harmonica players who are now very accomplished harmonica players, it's nice hearing that everyone has followed that exact same path of, you start and then you want to make those noises and you can't make the noise and you're just like, how do I do this? And then you have that breakthrough after lots of effort. And that's what everyone has. And I think students sometimes forget that, when they're listening to someone, playing on stage or on recording, like, oh, it sounds so easy. It's so effortless, but it's the same path for absolutely everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too, and what I'm discovering more about myself in quarantine and with all this woodshedding time is that there are things that I didn't put a lot of time into that I always wanted to learn how to do. So, for instance, me who was pretty much exclusively a lip purser for a long time, I worked on a lot of tongue blocking, a lot of doing octaves more, and all the effects that come with tongue blocking, like the flutter. I go side to side. I can't go on and off.
Okay.
It's always been like that. I know there's a lot of players who go on and off versus to the side, but that's something I've been working on a lot. So it's interesting because you can just always keep learning. There's always something new that you can, or a new technique that you hear someone do, and it's like, oh, I never really thought to do that. Yeah. That's what I'm discovering more and more.
Definitely. Well, it's cool. It sounds like you've taken a slightly bad scenario that we're all in at the moment, and you've turned it into something super positive. What else are you working on in the woodshed?
I mean, I've actually, because when I'm on tour, I spend so much of my time playing the chromatic that I don't really prioritize the diatonic. In the show, I only really play diatonic on 1 or 2 songs. Whereas with the chromatic, I'm playing like 8 songs on the chromatic. So much of my practice time when I'm on the road is based in chromatic. So it's been nice to come home, to be home, and to revisit all the stuff like even just like learning how to play juke correctly, or there's something like these little things that I never really learned because I got so serious about the chromatic. So the kind of stuff I've been woodshedding is, a lot of tongue blocking stuff, a lot of overblow things, connecting more of what I do on the chromatic to the diatonic. So it's been an interesting experience. It's definitely been a very concentrated last 10 weeks.
That's very cool. So, I mean, do you have a preference between the two instruments, between chromatic and diatonic?
I really like what Rob Paparozzi says about it. Says about the harmonica is that he doesn't differentiate the two instruments, and that's very much how I see it. They are, if I'm going for a different feel on a song, like if I'm playing like a shuffle and I want something that sounds a little bit different, I'll play the chromatic. If I'm playing, sometimes I'll play like on the tour, I'll play a song that like you would never think would have diatonic, but I want to take a risk and play diatonic. So I don't ever separate the two. It's all the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's cool to hear, but it also makes me feel a little bit bad because I've just used this excuse of, oh well, I'm not a chromatic player, so I don't do it. And more and more, in fact, watching you play has made me think more and more it's something I have to add to the arsenal because it's such a great sound.
It's just such a different. That's exactly it. It's just such a different sound, and it's not really like it has, because obviously you listen to guys like Larry Adler and Toots and Stevie, and it sounds really intimidating. Like you hear Larry Adler do Rhapsody in Blue and you're like, oh shit, okay. But for my purposes and the stuff that I like to play on it, I like to play blues on the chromatic, but I like to play it in all kinds of keys, and a lot of the stuff that I play with Sting is it's pretty rooted in there, but it's rooted in those minor pentatonic, major pentatonic things.
Mm-hmm. So with playing in different keys on the chromatic, do you play everything on a C, or do you play different key chromatics as well?
I use one other key chromatic. I play the C. I said before that I play. I think it's something like 8 songs or 10 songs on the set. Mm-hmm. I'll play the C chromatic for all of them except for one, which is Englishman in New York, which is a difficult song to navigate on a C chromatic.
Okay.
So for that song, I will use an A chromatic just because it lays out really nicely in third position. The song's in B minor, so it lays out really nicely in third position, and that tone of that opening note is really nice, and you can bend it really nicely on the 7 draw on an A chromatic.
Cool. I can visualize that. That's cool. So is Sting quite prescriptive about what songs have to have chromatic on and what songs you can play diatonic on, or is it your choice?
You always present something. So there are songs. A good example of a song that we added at the end of the last tour was "Hung My Head," which is a very famous song that Johnny Cash famously covered, but Sting wrote. I think it was on his Mercury Falling album. Originally, there's a horn line in it that it was originally done by the Memphis Horns, who played on everything. But I thought it sounded better on the chromatic. Personally, I thought it had more of that horn-like quality. Mm-hmm. But what he said to me was to play it on the diatonic, so it sounded a little bit more kind of folky, which was cool. And it was interesting for me because it just showed that we were thinking about the song differently, not better or worse, just differently. Mm-hmm. So I played on the diatonic, and it's cool because it's really hard to get that big octave with that note on the chromatic, but with that big octave on a diatonic, it sounds really, really full.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool. So you've been playing diatonic a while before you picked up the chromatic.
Yeah.
I think I've read the origin story of why you started playing chromatic correctly, but I really want to hear it from you. So, is it right that you only had 3 months to learn how to play chromatic?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so this is for everyone who wants to learn how to play major third position on the chromatic. This is as descriptive as I can get. So I was offered my first time playing with Sting. I was offered a chance to play with him at a charity event he was doing in Boston for a charity called the Lenny Zakem Fund, which is great. It's nonprofit, helps out kind of grassroots organizations in Boston. So it was great. He was in New York, and he decided to come and play at this benefit. And it was me and one other Berklee student who were playing there, and his, I guess, percussionist. So the song was Fields of Gold, which has this beautiful interlude in the middle. That's, I think, in all of his music, one of my favorite lines. And it's very simple. It's just going almost directly just down the D major scale, just down to the F sharp. That's it. And it's great. However, I think it was originally played on an accordion, so it sounded more, and unless you play in 12th position or something like that, it's not going to sound like it's supposed to sound on a diatonic. So I figured I should learn how to play chromatic. I had played, like I said before, I had played like with the William Clarke stuff and George Smith stuff. So I knew about the chromatic, but I was not very comfortable with it, especially not in a nuanced way. So I sought out chromatic teachers in Boston, and the guy that I came to know and who became an unbelievably important influence in my playing and my life was a guy named Mike Turk, who's a brilliant chromatic player and a brilliant diatonic player. He was, along with Will Scarlett and Howard Levy, one of the first overblowers, like wow, when it first became a thing. Keep in mind, I did not know anything about overblowing, and our first lesson, I remember he sat me down at the piano and took an out-of-the-box marine band in the key of C and played the whole chromatic scale the whole way up the instrument.
Wow, that's badass.
I was like, oh, okay, all right. So I took lessons with Mike for about 3 months, and they were very intense, and I learned quite a bit about the chromatic. And coming from the background that I did of just this third position thing, he introduced me to a new way of thinking about chromatic. But long story short, I went and played the gig, and it was very nerve-wracking. But I was able to pull it out, and I actually played on 2 songs that night. I played on Fields of Gold and then Every Breath You Take, which is an A, which is a weird key to play on the C chromatic, but. Yeah, it was just a lot of preparation, and as a result of those 3 months, it kind of got me to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. So, like, what's the kind of secret sauce to kind of getting from diatonic to chromatic as quickly as possible?
I mean, there really. So when I first started, I knew a little bit about theory and being a drummer, which we almost have like no concept of melody and harmony. I had to kind of go find it for myself. So the most major thing that I did was this scale study, was just simply knowing how to play C major, all the major and minor scales, and all those kind of fun scales like harmonic minor, whole tone scale, all that stuff. So I had a book that I would write in when I was that age, that I just wrote out. I sat at a piano and wrote out all of the scales that I needed to know. I still use that book to this day. And just for months and years, I would just practice those scales. And, unfortunately, that's really the best way to kind of, it's just different. Like when you learn a scale on the diatonic, it's the same. It doesn't matter if it's in third position or second position. It's the same on every harmonica. Mm-hmm. But with a chromatic, it's just a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's not better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah. Joe, it's so nice having someone else say it, because, I say this until I'm blue in the face to all my students. It's like, yeah, the best thing you can do is just practice your scales. And I think they think I'm kidding, but it's so true.
Mm-hmm. I really like what Jason Ritchie says about it, is that they're like the words in the sentence. They're like, it's like you learn how to speak a language, mm-hmm. But if you only study one player, or you only study one feel or one scale, like you're only ever going to be limited to that. Like if you only study the blues scale of the minor pentatonic, you will only ever be able to do that. So learning all these different scales, it reminds you that you have different colors to play with.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really solid point. And I think something that a lot of people forget is that sometimes the variation from one scale to the next is, one or two notes, and that completely changes the whole flavor. So you kind of think of things, I certainly know for me on diatonic, I think of things in terms of my kind of master scales, my kind of major scale. And then I think about how something else would vary based on that. So like the idea of learning all of these scales in all of these positions might be a bit overwhelming, but if you think about it as, there are scales that are linked to each other and you can learn the variations, that makes it a little bit easier, I think, to get through it.
I mean, the other thing is that there's a lot of crossover. There's, there are some scales on the chromatic that are very easy to learn, but there are other ones that are very hard. Like even, he's one of my biggest heroes, which is Stevie Wonder. He only really, if you really study his music, he only really plays in 4 or 5 keys, and those are the keys that he really lives in. So there are some that lay out really well in the chromatic, and just like when you play diatonic, there are certain bends that we all love on certain key diatonics, but they're, I don't know. It's just different.
Yeah. Oh man, you've inspired me. I'm definitely going to be quizzing you more over the coming weeks about chromatic, because I think I'm ready to be serious.
Well, one huge tip, and I heard Hank Shreve talk about this, who's a very good friend of mine, and I loved this tip for anyone who plays third position chromatic on, let's say, a C chromatic, is when you play the minor pentatonic scale, which is 1 draw, 2 draw, 3 blow, 3 draw, 4 draw with the button in, or 4 blow, and then 5 draw. So that 2 draw is your minor, minor third. If you just put the button in, it gives you an F sharp instead, which is your major third. That's how you play major on the chromatic. That's it. That's the only thing you have to change.
Nice. It's so simple. It's brilliant. Very cool.
But it gives you a different tone. And let's say you're playing, a blues that's in D major. If you always play minor, it's not always going to sound appropriate.
No, that's a really cool thought. I like that. Okay, so let's go back to a little bit of the musical journey. So non-musicians probably don't realize this, but when someone introduces themselves and tells you that they went to Berklee, like you're just instantly like, whoa, this is a serious musician. It's very intimidating, because so many of the musicians that we all look up to are Berklee graduates. It's it's the best musical institution on the planet, certainly to my mind. How was it for someone studying harmonica, which is an instrument that a lot of people don't take very seriously? How did you find that?
So I actually have to be 100% honest here. When I started at Berklee, I was there for drums.
Okay.
That was initially when I was 18. I said I want to study drums. That's what I want to do. Really, the thing that people don't tell you about Berklee is that I think it's like kind of one of the better kept secrets is that it's really a networking college. Like, obviously, it's really great to graduate, and it's, there's been great people like Susan Tedeschi and Vinny Caliuto who've gone on to do great things and have graduated. However, most of the people, when they go there, it's really to network, to learn some stuff, and to meet potential band members. That's really the whole crux of Berklee, and more that's becoming the case. So when I went there with a focus in drums, and I went there for around the time of my second year. I wanted to really study harmonica, because all of the stuff that I was playing, all the gigs I was getting were all on harmonica. They weren't on drums. So I approached the board and said, like, I want to do this. Like, I want to play harmonica. And there were several students along with me that also wanted to study harmonica. They thought it was enough to have it be a principal instrument at the college, which it's not. Um, the board came back to me and said, "Yeah, that's great, but we don't believe that it's a real principal instrument."
Yeah.
So I took that as a stubborn 20-year-old as, oh, okay, well then I've exhausted my, then this isn't going to help me anymore. So after my second year, I left. I was done with Berklee. I said, you know what? I learned what I needed to learn. I got my head on straight with harmony and theory. However, if they're not going to let me study harmonica, then that's what I want to go do. This isn't a good use of my time. So I left, and basically from the time I was 19 to when I was about 25, I spent most of my time just gigging, really playing blues. That was my passion. That was my love. I spent it studying, and I was very fortunate to have great teachers like Mike Turk and Annie Raines and Ronnie Shellist, and just really, really tremendous teachers. Yeah, so I like to tell people that I kind of forged my own curriculum. Like I took the Berklee idea, but just applied it somewhere else. So, however, my time at Berklee was great. I met great people. My very dear friend and great collaborator, a guy named Gabe Stillman, who's a brilliant guitarist, blues guitarist. Him and I have done some great things together. But it's been, I definitely learned a lot there. It's, I would go back someday, but I don't know if they would have a harmonica player.
That's very cool. I like that story, and I also like this. There seems to be a real legacy of people leaving Berklee to do better things. John Mayer springs to mind. I feel like you have to go there and have a bit of it. Like I had a buddy from Scotland who went and spent a semester there. He's a jazz guitarist, and he was really good before he went, and then he came back and he was just unrecognizable. Like he completely destroyed the local scene. He just was a whole other level. So I think just a little bit of the Berklee magic goes a really long way.
I think another big thing that Berklee does is if you're set in one genre, like if you're set in jazz or you're set in heavy metal, whatever it is, Berklee will do a great job of exposing you to these other genres of music that you maybe would have been too stubborn to learn in other ways. Like for me as a drummer, I knew all the kind of basic feels, 3/4 swing, shuffle, all those basic bossa nova things. But then they were introducing, these really advanced samba rhythms and things that I had no idea how to play, which was really cool. And when I would refocus more on harmonica, it pushed me more in other directions on harmonica too. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe I haven't explored jazz enough, or maybe I haven't explored bossa nova enough. It'd be an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, very cool. So let's come back a little bit to Sting, because that's kind of a big thing for you at the moment. So you started touring with him last year. Were you supposed to be touring with him at the moment? Is there stuff that has been put on hold?
Yeah. So pretty much this whole we were actually this week supposed to be starting the Las Vegas residency, which is a shame. But I think basically what's going to happen is everything is going to get moved a year, essentially. So everything we were going to do this week, we're going to do a year from now. Which is totally fine. I'm very content doing what I'm doing now, and I still give lessons. And yeah, it sucks, but it's not really the end of the world.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't even begin to imagine how awesome it must be being on the road with such a huge act, but also kind of playing for audiences who are actually excited to hear the music. Because I mean, certainly the blues harmonica world, you're quite often spending time playing gigs to people who are lukewarm at the best of times. And so, like, I used to play in a wedding band, and I'm one of the few people who loves playing in wedding bands because you're playing music that people love, and so when you kick off with Kings of Leon, Sex on Fire, and everyone goes crazy. Okay, it's not an amazing song, but everyone's going crazy because they love it. And you got to go on the road with someone who people really love. That must be amazing.
Yeah, and it's the thing about it is that it is amazing, but at the same time, the level of discipline and dedication you need to have is pretty severe.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what condition you're in, you show up 100% ready to play every night. And towards the end of the tour, the last run of the tour, we were doing 6 shows a week.
Wow,
which is a lot for anyone. I started playing with Sting. I think it was about a year ago. The tour started, and before that, I played with him after the show that I did with him in Boston. I played one other one-off show with him at Carnegie Hall, which was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was cool because unlike Fields of Gold and Brand New Day, which is the big song that I play on the road with him, the song that he had me play at Carnegie Hall didn't have an existing part to learn. Mm-hmm. It was here's the landscape, try to paint, or here's the sheet of paper, try to paint something over it, which was cool. It was very artistically difficult, especially when I was that age. I think I was 22 when I did that. And I'm pretty sure that I blacked out on stage. But then after that, about 2 years after that, I got an offer to play this New Year's gig, which was a very big deal for me. And it was especially a big deal because it was on chromatic, and everyone knows the song that I was playing, which was Brand New Day. And they also know that it was famously played on harmonica by Stevie Wonder. So it was a lot of pressure on me, especially to learn. And that's not an easy song to learn on the chromatic. But whereas there's some other songs that are easier, this one was a little more difficult, especially with all the nuance that Stevie puts on his notes. Right before that show, I think it was a month or so before, my family and I we were going to India. So we were in India and Nepal for almost a month when I was doing the prep for that show. So I would be sitting in the lawn of the monastery that we were staying at, playing this opening part on the chromatic, which was cool. It was very interesting, and got to New York to play the show, and it was great. It's on YouTube. If you just search Sting Times Square New Year's Eve, you'll see me. And yeah, that was kind of the launching point for that was my audition for the tour, which was cool.
That's very cool. Yeah. So anything that you've mentioned, I'll actually put in the show notes so people can just click straight through. And yeah, I watched that video. It's amazing. It's very cool.
Yeah. The thing that made that night very difficult was if you play chromatic harmonica or harmonica in general, you'll know what I mean, is that it was very cold and it was very wet. Mm-hmm. Two things that the harmonica does not like, especially when you have a button that you need to work with.
Yeah.
So I remember I was standing on the stage and my mouthpiece was facing up, and there was just water because it was pouring rain and it was cold. I was like, oh God, I don't know what's going to happen. But everything worked out in the end. And that was really the catalyst for the rest of the year.
That's that's quite a way to start the year, isn't it? It's very, very cool. Okay, well, I want to be mindful of not taking up too much of your time because you've been very gracious in agreeing to do this. But I'd love to know if there's anything that you're working on that you want me to kind of direct listeners to go and check out. Do you have any new projects?
Not currently. People, if they want to hear some of the stuff that I've been doing, obviously can check out my YouTube channel. It's just Shane Segar, harmonica player. And the new album, the live My Songs album with Sting, has me featured on harmonica and I believe 5 songs.
Nice.
and both chromatic and diatonic. And yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully we can chat some more about chromatic at some time. That would be very cool.
Would love that, man. Thank you so
cool.
much for having me. And again, like to everyone who's been on the podcast, like Jason and Ronnie and PT Gazelle, they're all big heroes of mine. So to be with this kind of pantheon of players is a big honor for me. So thanks.
Oh, absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure. All right. Take it easy. See you later.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tomlin's Harmonica podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Join me next Monday for the next episode. Happy harping!